Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another installment in the Sydney Railroad build. At the end of the last episode, I mentioned that I needed to build the integral workbench before I could continue with the sub-roadbed that I was working on. Well, in this week's episode, I'm going to take care of that workbench and also build one more frame for the peninsula. So without further ado, let's just head out into the workshop and get busy. Hope you enjoy the show. This morning's task is to build an L-shaped workbench in this area. I started off by cutting all the parts I needed. Here are the two tops. I've got a whole load of strips of wood over there to frame it with, and I've already built the legs. On previous railroad builds, I used to build a few frames and then build a batch of legs to support them on. What I've been doing on this layout is building a batch of legs before I build frames. That way, the moment I've got it built, I can install it. That's one less time I've got to move it, thus saving a couple of minutes on each piece, and over the course of the railroad, that can mount up. The next task is to start building the frame that goes under it. I did all the design work last night, so it should be fairly straightforward. So don't go away, I'll check in with you later. Well, here is the main beam that supports the workbench. It's positioned accurately horizontally, although I have not yet leveled the feet. These two sticks of wood just hold it, stop it falling over. They will eventually be taken away once it's properly braced by the tops. It has to span about 6 feet, which is further than I like to go between legs. So I've built up a strong beam. There are 4 thicknesses of 3/4 inch plywood, 4 inches deep. And then the top flanges allow me to screw the workbench down from underneath to avoid having screw holes in the top. There will be a spacer piece in the middle holding them the right distance apart, but that will be installed after I know exactly where it's going to be. Next thing to do is level that and build the framing for the other portion of the workbench that goes across the end of the room. So let me do that and I will be right back. This short beam does double duty. It supports the workbench and the end of the staging yard frame. So these two legs are now permanent. I've screwed it here, it rests on a block. This little leg at the back can come out once I have got a block in under here to support this piece. I've already removed the temporary leg in the corner. But that's all the time I have this morning. I have to go meet somebody shortly. So I'm going to sign off here for the day, and I will check in with you tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Don't go away. Well, the first thing I did this morning was to add an extra block on this leg. I knew it wasn't right as soon as I looked at it. The beam at the back wasn't doing anything. All it was doing is hanging on the 2 screws that I used to attach it to the leg. Now with the extra block that I've glued on the leg, it actually takes weight. And I've done the same on the other leg at the back. As I said, I knew it wasn't right as soon as I looked at it, but I was rushing to make a deadline, and that's not the best time to do any thinking. This side has now been all secured. I've got the extra hangers in the back, and I've installed the last piece of top for the staging yard, and that keeps that frame totally rigid. Now I just got to put 2 more joists under the workbench, and then I can install the first piece of top. So let me do that and I will be right back. Well, here are the joists that support the end workbench. They are glued and screwed at this end because they will come apart with this end frame. The legs will be detachable, but the top and these 3 beams will be all one section. At this end they are toe screwed, 4 screws in each joist, and resting on these blocks which are glued. Because it needs to come apart at this point. This double beam across here is part of the other half of the workbench. And there will be a splice about there. Last thing before I install the top is to get the flanges on. Let me do that quickly and I will be right back. Well, there are those 2 top flanges installed. I've also put the spacers in between these 2 beams. That is something that I knew right from the beginning that I needed. It was even on my drawing. It's also something that I will never forget to include. I remember my structures professor in the class where we talked about using a double angle as a single beam, well actually in that case it was as a strut, how important those spaces are. He showed us a photograph of a construction worker falling to his death during an accident caused by the failure of a double angle strut where someone had forgotten to install the spacers. So I will never forget to install those, even though obviously this is not a life and death situation. Well, that is all the framing completed for the other half of the workbench. What I've got to do now is get the top and install it. So let me do that and I will be right back. Well, that is the workbench finished, including the angled fillet in the corner and the edging. That is cut from a 2x4, first ripped down the middle and then made into an L-shaped piece on the table saw, screwed from below. The fit isn't quite perfect in places, so I'm going to have to get some filler and then sand it. But that will be a job for another time. With the workbench completed on Friday, my main task for the day is to build the benchwork that goes behind it. I've got the first frame in, bolted at both ends, and a splice plate under this joint so that the two pieces will hold each other in alignment. I started by positioning the turnouts approximately in line with where they go, just to make sure that I didn't put cross braces where switch machines were going to have to go. I don't need as many on a narrow board, since the side rails are only about 6 inches apart. Next thing I've got to do is get a plywood top on and mark where the curves are going to have to fit at the two ends. Because there is a small curved fillet in here and a much bigger one at this end, because where this turnout leads into a 3-foot radius curve that heads over along the back of that frame and to the reversing loop. I have the rest of the sheet of plywood that I cut off when I was doing this corner of the staging yard, so I'm going to position that temporarily in place and mark out where I've got to cut it. So let me do that and I will be right back. Well, I've now got everything worked out, got the subroadbed installed. I had to two-piece it because the offcut I had wasn't quite wide enough to do this curve. So I just cut it here and added a small piece at the end. The next task after lunch will be to continue working on this curve, get the piece that goes along the back of the workbench and joins up with that subroadbed over there. But as I said, that will be a task for after lunch. So don't go away, I'll be right back. Well, I have now got all the subroadbed done around the back and connecting up with the bit that goes down behind the central wall. I've still got some clamps on it, or glue sets, but that's all I'm going to do today. I'm going to go in now, feed Zeus, and I'll come back out tomorrow. I've got loads to get on with tonight inside. So don't go away, I will check in with you again tomorrow. Well, I didn't make a clip when I first got out here this morning, but I have marked out where all the foam roadbed goes along the back area and all the curves, this half of the Y and the two single track curves around here through the state line tunnel scene. I've also put in a few missing screws and I've put hangers for the lower level grade along here, or one hanger there and one bracket on that leg, so the temporary legs are now gone. The next task is to put about a 4-inch wide strip of thin plywood around the edge of this track, serving double duty as both a backboard for the workbench and as a fence to stop any trains falling off in the unlikely event he ever has a derailment. So let me do that quickly and I will be right back. Well, that step is now complete. I needed 4.5 inch high walls all the way around, 4 pieces I could have done it with two 8-foot strips, but that would have meant joining the two offcuts together, and I didn't want to do that. So I cut a whole new piece. It's always the right way to do things, makes it look neater. Anyway, it's still a long time before lunch, but I've got to let that set up before I can remove the clamps and work out where the outlet boxes are going to go. So I'm going to get on with something else in the meantime. I have the other leg of the Y that I can work on getting around here into the right place. Well, more or less anyway. Those clamps are in the way, but I think I can get it nearly there. Maybe not. And then the other task for today is to build the next frame that goes on the end of here. And that is a complicated one because the river valley makes it too tall to turn on its back to go down the stairs into the basement, and it's too wide to go down right way up. So it's got to divide down the middle so that the main frame is in one piece and the two tracks that go down the back are another piece. So I think I'm going to get organized with that piece next. Don't go away, I will be right back. Well, I've marked out the two side frames for this deep section. Since the one at the front drops further than the one at the back, I can do them one inside the other for economy of materials. It took a while to get them marked out, but cutting them is fairly simple. I just have to start at the bottom of the sheet, work my way in. Then once I've got the two side frames, the piece in the middle will be good for all the cross pieces. So let me just finish cutting out the parts and I will be right back. Well, that is most of the parts cut and the outer frame assembled. I cut all 5 of these drop joists out of the same 11.5-inch wide strip of plywood. By overlapping them and turning each alternate one round, I was able to get them all in one strip with about ½ inch left over. So I lucked out there. As I was cutting them, I realized that I goofed up earlier. I didn't mark the center of the front and back members, and now I don't really have anything to measure from. So what I'm going to have to do is just measure from the end and then use a big square to transfer it to the middle of the joist. And then on the front, which is actually on the back of the workbench right now, I'll need a 2-foot level. So let me plot those centers, work out where the other joists go, and I'll be right back. Don't go away. Well, that frame is now finished and installed. With that done, I can get back to my main task for the day, which is to finish the workbench area. It still has all the clamps on it, although that glue has been setting up for several hours now, so I can remove them all, and then I can cut holes to put the outlets in. Well, there are the 6 outlets installed. They're not wired up. The client's electrician will do that when the layout gets assembled in Australia. At the moment, they're just placeholders. I just wanted to make sure they fitted, get space reserved for them. I couldn't get the spacing quite even along the back because I have to avoid the joists and I want to keep them well away from switch machines. So I just spaced them as evenly as they would go, bearing that in mind. What I could possibly have done is bunch these 3 up slightly and then put 1 extra one along that back wall, but I only had 6. The client did send me 2 that were slightly different, but I thought it would look silly using an odd one. Anyway, I sent a photograph to the client last night and he really likes his new work area. Well, that's all for this week. No, the workbench isn't quite finished yet. I still have to fill the gaps and sand off that glue squeeze out. As of the day that I'm recording this sign-off clip, that has actually been done. I don't recall what date it was. I didn't take a picture either. Anyway, I'm going to sign off here. Hope you enjoyed this video, found it interesting or useful, or both. And I hope to see you back next time, where I will continue building benchwork sections for the peninsula. So until then, thanks for watching, and bye for now.